All right, we'll kick things off. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to Tree Talks for a special fourth edition of our In Conversation series. Today, Canopy's founder and executive director, Nicole Rycroft, will be joined by Haka founder and forest conservationist, Farwiza Farhan. Together, they will discuss the importance of local and lived experience in conservation and the global impact of the Indonesian women defending the rich life of the Leuser ecosystem. Plus, you'll hear what's next in Canopy's and Haka's work to protect the vital ecosystem of the Leuser, which is also a canopy landscape of hope. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Katie Hicks. I'm Financing Change Manager for Canopy, and I'm joining you today from Vancouver Island. For thousands of years, the Kowatsan, Malahat, Subaset, Halalt, Panalakut, Zuminas, and Layaxan peoples have walked gently on the traditional territories for community, social, economic, and spiritual purposes. They've never given up title on this land, nor have they been compensated for it. Nutslikunus chi tu Kowatsan mustayo utotomix muskugip utonoqueo I heichka. Thank you. So just a few quick notes about our session today. Please feel free to ask a question by using the chat function on your screen, and we'll address those questions at the end. If you do message those questions directly to myself, Nicole, or Farwiza, we won't be able to see those. So please just feel free to pop your questions in the chat. If we don't get to your question today, we'll happily follow up via email. You can reach us anytime at hello@canopyplanet.org. And if your internet connection does cut out, you're welcome to use the phone dial-in numbers. Those are found in your event invite that you got to your email. You can rejoin that way. There's also an opportunity to turn on closed captioning if you prefer. You can do so by clicking the More button. It's the three buttons on the far right before the leave. Don't press the leave. And you can select captions from there. So with that, we'll get started. We're so thrilled that you joined us today. And I'm very excited personally to hear from Nicole and Farwiza. So Nicole, I will give that over to you if you want to kick things off.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Katie. And hi, everybody. Greetings from chilly New York City. Wonderful to be with you all. And thanks for making time on what I know are busy dance cards. We'll be aiming to have you out of here at the top of the hour, but first we've got a kind of a rollicking ride for the next 55 minutes and a great conversation with one of my favorite people within the conservation movement, and I'm sure someone who will soon be one of your favorite people in the conservation movement if you don't know them, if you don't know Leuser already. So as many of you likely know, Canopy is a solutions-driven NGO, and we work to protect the world's forests, climate and biodiversity, and support community rights by transforming unsustainable supply chains. So we currently work with hundreds of brands and producers and innovators to shift paper and packaging and viscose textiles out of the world's ancient and endangered forests, these climate and biodiverse rich forest ecosystems. A lot of the work that we do can get pretty geeky, you know, policy language, traceability systems, technical performance of different raw materials for making packaging and t-shirts. That's all towards ensuring that the products that are part of everyday life, the clothing that we wear, the packaging that our cereal comes in, that those products don't cost the earth. And this enables us to systemically change some of the core drivers of forest degradation and deforestation so that forests can be protected as we need to hit 2030 planetary targets. And our work to conserve forest landscapes is always in close partnership with an amazing network of other NGOs, both global and local, science organizations, advocacy organizations, community development focused orgs, and our local NGO partners are particularly important in our work to secure and help protect the world's landscapes of hope. It's our local NGO partners that are on the front lines. It's our NGO partners that will be there for the decades of change that come in the future. We work very closely with many of them to secure durable and just conservation. And so with that, I'm context for this conversation, I'm particularly excited to be able to spend the next 50 minutes having a conversation with our friend, a collaborator, and a Canopy board member, Farwiza Farhan, better known within the movement as Wiza. Wiza is a leader of Haka, which is an award-winning Indonesian environmental not-for-profit. Wiza and the amazing Haka team work to protect the Leuser ecosystem in Sumatra. I'm not going to sort of completely do the spoiler alert, but for those of you that aren't familiar with the Leuser yet, you're about to fall in love with one of the world's true landscapes of hope. Very charismatic, straight out of the, like the pages of a storybook jungle, and home to obviously millions and millions of people. Wiza works and lives on the front lines of environmental protection and climate action. Her impact in community-driven conservation has been recognized with Whitley Award, the Pritzker Emerging Environmental Genius Award. I love having genius associated with you, Wiza. Malago Fellowship, the TED Fellowship, and then just last year, you may have noted Wiza's face on the cover of Time magazine, where she was recognized as one of the top 100 rising stars around the world. So now that I probably have you blushing profusely, Wiza, welcome, selamat pagi. Great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Nicole. You are an incredible host. I'm like listening to you. It's like, wow, so great. All this work, all these relationships that you build with organizations globally, and the impact that you have driven with them and through them as well. I'm so impressed.
Now you're trying to make me blush. No, we can't start that. Okay, let's dive into, I have a few questions, and then of course we're going to open it up for other folks to be able to ask questions as well. But maybe we can start with the Leuser ecosystem. Like, it's incredibly charismatic landscape, those huge buttress trees that would take, I don't know, 15, 20 people to kind of stretch and fingertips touching to get around. Rich understories, just the incredible biodiversity. I remember the first time that I was in the Leuser and just spending an hour or two completely mesmerized, cemented like to the spot that I was in, watching this beautiful orangutan and her baby. And I probably would still be there if you hadn't dragged me back to the research station for lunch. So I don't know if you can remember the first time that you visited the Leuser ecosystem, but if you can, then I'd love for you to share a little bit of that with all of us.
It was a decade ago. I was a fresh graduate. I wanted to work in conservation so badly, but it was difficult to find a job in conservation. And then through chance encounter, I met the Leuser Ecosystem Management Authority. At that time, it's a government institution. And at that time, someone took a risk on me. Someone said, Wiza, let's join our organizations, without knowing much about the work that I do, but take that risk. He took me to the Leuser Ecosystem, and at that time I flew from Medan, which is the big capital city in Sumatra, across the forest into Kutachane, and then drive out to Ketambe Research Station. We flew in a small plane, and from above, I'm so used to fly across other parts of Sumatra or other parts of Borneo and see palm oil as far as eyes can see, with patch of forest in between. But when you fly across Leuser, you see mountains after mountains after mountains, and it's just forest and forest and forest and forest and forest endlessly. It's incredible. I've never imagined that such landscape still exists. I didn't know that, when they talk about this amazing landscape, I didn't realize that it is at home. It is so close to where I come from. When we land in Kutachane and drive out to Ketambe, I was new in this conservation world. I was not dressed properly. I have no idea how.
Did you get a leash?
How to go into the forest. So at that time, I wear running shoes, breathable, and I wear jeans, and I wear a shirt that you normally would wear to the office, because I don't know what to wear, right? And that's my first day at work. After lunch, Mike Griffith said, let's go into the forest to shake off the sleepiness. I have no idea what I'm in for. So we go for a walk into the forest, me with my running shoes. Very quickly, leeches all over me, on my jeans, on my socks, on my shoes. And of course, the breathable running shoes doesn't help either. It's just like entry holes.
They are amazing at getting in everywhere.
Exactly. It freaks me out. I didn't know how to respond. I tried to outrun them. And of course, you can't outrun leeches. But then Mike hold my shoulder and he practically say, Wiza, stop. And when I stopped, I took a moment as he's picking leeches off my feet. I look up and there it was, a mother and a baby orangutan. And the mother observing me. I'm sure all sorts of judgment in her space.
I'm sure she was judging you.
Sure of it. And the baby orangutan was just acrobating in all these, thick trees and lianas that float down to the forest floor. It sort of got me thinking, man, I don't know how I'm gonna love this job, but I think I would. And Mike asked me, if you hate leeches so much, why would you want to be forest conservationist? Why do you want to protect this landscape? And it sort of dawned on me how oftentimes our understanding is so narrow and specific on one thing. We fail to see that this landscape gives so much beyond the part that you hate. And now I learn to make peace with.
Awesome. So you're even a champion of the leeches.
Almost.
almost. I think there's really something quite wonderful about what you just said and the importance of intact landscapes in particular, right? Like I've found as I've flown, be it over Sumatra or be it over Vancouver Island, a little closer kind of to where I normally reside. When you fly over large expanses of degraded ecosystems, and then you finally get to an intact, like a large expanse of intact. And the Leuser ecosystem is 2.6 million hectares, right? So it's a big, beautiful kind of blob of green on the map. And when you're looking down at that, there's something that for me anyway is like it's a relief. Like I feel like I can breathe a little easier. Or I'm wondering, if you can maybe speak just a little bit more to the importance of intact landscapes for us, globally from a planetary system perspective, but also just on a very personal level.
I studied biology in my undergrad, and in that biology classes, we were taught about this island biogeography theory, which at that time doesn't make much sense to me. But practically what it says is if you have a large space of intact landscape, and then you slice it in half, then the survival rates of species within this now two separate landscape become reduced. And as the pieces of landscape place further away from one another, then the survivability of species within it become reduced even more. I didn't understand such theory until I work in the Leuser ecosystem and realized that these landscapes are incredible because on one hand, it's so big, but at the same time, it is the minimum size to maintain the population of these 4 big megafaunas, the tiger, the elephant, the rhinos, and the orangutan. And we love talking about the 4 big megafaunas because they're easy to recognize. Who could not fall in love with a tiger? It's easy, they're fluffy and they're cute, but at the same time, they also serve as an umbrella species because they exist in certain landscape. So many other species within that landscape could also survive. This year, we are looking into doing research to map out insects and fungi in the Leuser ecosystem, those hardly known, those mostly forgotten. But few instances when we bump into them in the wild, we realize that they're incredible and we know so little about them. We don't even know how they could contribute to human society. When scientists found penicillin, we would never imagine how that have influenced our civilization. And we could only make sure that our future as humanity continue by looking after the ecosystems that we depend on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that mix of like many of us gravitate towards the charismatic megafauna and the enigmatic microflora is, like so foundational for life on Earth and our well-being, right? So often overlooked, but so important. That's right. A little shout out to mycorrhizal fungi in the chat. I love that. So Wiza, maybe you could, you're the founder and director of HACA, the NGO that when translated into English is Forest, Nature and Environment of Aceh. Tell us a little bit more about how HACA was started, the work that you're doing.
As initially mentioned, my first job in the Leuser Ecosystem started off with the Leuser Ecosystem Management Authority, a government agency. Sometimes in Indonesia, political space for environmental organizations are not the most friendly. So this government authority was so effective in protecting this landscape, is so effective in tackling the challenges of exploitation, deforestation, the building of roads that could slice this ecosystem, that a whole lot of people in power don't like it. So in 2012, they dismantled our organizations from one day to the next. We found ourselves to have no jobs, no office, nothing. Suddenly we lose our grounds. And of course, my colleague and I, we refused to give up on our work. So we move our office from the office to a coffee shop because we were penniless at that time. We ordered 1 cup of coffee and we sit there all day.
Oh, much to the proprietor's joy, I'm sure.
I'm sure they contributed to our continuity and well-being.
An in-kind donor.
Yes, exactly that. And we kind of like scrambled together. What are we going to do? How are we going to reshape ourselves? How are we going to move forward with the work that we do? And through that space, we realized that a lot of us wants to do different things. And because some of us wants to do rhino patrol, some of us wants to do campaign, some of us wants to do mapping, some of us want to do, because a million different things that we want to do based on our own expertise, we decided, okay, let's pull ourselves together and start a nonprofit. And somehow we choose the name HACA. It have a good abbreviation in Bahasa Indonesia, which is Forest, Nature and Environment Aceh. But then it also mirrored and inspired by the New Zealand war dance.
Nice.
We sort of thought, let's be that organization
Warriors
that are willing to take up difficult fight, that are willing to do things that is necessary, even if it's uncomfortable. Let's do things that we have to do, even though it's unpopular. So that's how we ended up starting HACA.
I love that. I didn't know that about the name. Willing to step forward as warriors. Admirable. Yeah. So at Canopy, we focus on, as you know, shifting the practices of corporate decision makers. We have a particular focus on large customers of forest products, and then work with our brand partners to create the economic incentives for a change in business as usual practice on the part of producers and government. And then along with that work, or parallel with that, we strive to help advance conservation and the building of conservation-based economies. And so there's a kind of a duality to the work that we do. And I think one of the things that I really love about the work that you do at HACA is kind of the complement of it, but also the fact that you're working on multiple levels as well. So can you share just a little bit more about, the dual streams of work that are focused both on kind of law and policy, as well as empowering frontline communities and workers?
again, when I started conservation, I have no idea what it takes. I thought to do conservation work, you need to be an ecologist, you need to be a scientist, and you need to do research. And based on your research, good policies will just happen by default. And of course not. I realized that no, we get all this good information, we get all this research that speak of the importance of protecting ecosystems, but ecosystem doesn't get protected by default. Through this process, we realized that, okay, law needs to be put in place to protect landscape like the Leuser ecosystem. The Leuser ecosystem could have this level of protection because people in the past make this into law. And then each of these laws still needs to be translated to be able to be implemented. But then in this process, being an ecologist, I don't necessarily understand the complicated role that local community are playing in protecting these landscapes. Throughout my training, we were taught that local community are often the perpetrator of illegal logging, of poaching, of destructions of wildlife habitats. But then when you spend more time with them, when you speak to them, you realize they also the best protectors of wildlife. They are also dealing with pressure of losing lands. They are sometimes facing the reality that they lost their rights too, as much as the animals are losing their habitats. So the work that we do then evolve. Our first combinations of both communities and law and advocacy work culminates when we did a citizen lawsuit. So the community in Aceh Tamiang back in 2004 have been engaging in forest protection. But then in 2006, there's a large flash floods that happened and wipe out their entire village. The financial loss in this 2006 floods was equal to Aceh budget at that time. So it's a huge financial loss. And then when they realized that, wow, these floods is like tsunami from the mountains. And they realized that that happened because there's a lot of clearing upstreams that was not apparent at the time. So they went upstream and they start restoring the forest. They start cutting down palm oil, restoring the forest. But then in 2013, when the government was issuing a special plan for Aceh, the entire area that they have restored get taken out of protected areas. And they get upset. They were like, oh my God, so much investment in time and energy and the work that we do. And then government with one piece of paper, just delete that from protection. So they protest, they send a lot of letters, they petition the government, they rise and do a lot of demonstration. And then we kind of observe this awareness and empowerment and thought, why don't this group of communities share their knowledge with other groups of communities across the Leuser ecosystem who may not be so aware on how to deal with the government? So then we did sort of learning exchange through these different community groups. And in that process, a lot of people get activated and get angry. And when they get angry, they're like, you know what? We could do something about this. We could engage the government in doing this. And that process led us to launch the first ever citizen lawsuit in Aceh, suing the Indonesian government and the Aceh government. And we bring all these communities to court. And in that process, is also something interesting that happened because at first, there's a little bit of fear for the community to be suing the government. Sure. We need to understand that this is groups of people who went through civil conflict, who dealing with all sorts of violations from the government, who are facing discriminations at all times. So when they see the courtroom, they imagine somehow a trickery of a government will put them in the defendant seat, even if they come in as a witness. But then this process of engaging in the citizen lawsuit took them to a place where they feel, actually, I can engage. Actually, there is things that I can do and I can be protected from suddenly being placed as defendants when I come in as a witness. And after 2 years of court battle, we lose in court, but each of these community members become much stronger in their resolve to protect the forest around them. So then they come home to the community and say, you know what, it's okay. Let's do the spatial plan starting from our village. Let's do it from this district. Let's strengthen our own ground before we go in and sue the government again. We can do it. We done it before, and it's fine. And that's kind of the seed of subsequent grassroots organizing that Haka ended up doing. We're learning a lot through this process, and that learning goes both ways. For me personally, more than anything, I learned to better appreciate that that knowledge that stems from the ground up. I had that arrogance of someone who thought of herself as being very educated, but then get very humble through this experience.
Yeah, those moments are wonderful moments, right? When we catch ourselves, get to check our egos, our assumptions. And I think that's one of the things that I love most about your work and Haka's work is that it's iterative, right? It's constantly evolving. It recognizes that conditions are never static. And to secure durable conservation, it has to be socially durable. It has to work for the communities and the people that are living in the front lines and within those landscapes. So that's wonderful. I'm going to just kind of flag for folks, if you have questions, if things are kind of popping into your mind as Wiza's chatting, then feel free to pop them in the Q&A section down below. And then I think between a combination of Britt, Katie, and myself, we'll get them hopefully to Wiza in the kind of open Q&A section. Can you share with us 3 things? Could be 4, could be 2, could be 5, but 3 things that are coming up for you, for Haka, that you're particularly excited about? You always have so many things on the go, so I'm kind of like, what's your top 3 picks for exciting things on the horizon?
First of all, we are celebrating a decade anniversary since Haka was born back in 2013. So this year we are planning a deep structural reform in the organizations. We kind of, we're not trained to run a nonprofit. We just do. We create an organization based on the needs and the dreams of people within it. And somehow we got to a point, okay, we need to pay more attention to internal things like HR. So we are in the process of doing internal reform across the organization, and this will take time. And there will be, quite a process that's quite new for us. But then on top of that, we're also working with Canopy to transform our economic opportunity in Aceh, in the Leuser ecosystem. I'm super excited with our upcoming ecotourism master plan work. I'm super excited about the very idea that we have an alternative. We don't have to go into the future in the same way that other landscapes, other provinces, other countries have done. We could choose differently, and I'm looking forward for that. 2 things okay?
2 things are good. 2 things are fine. I'm honored that our joint work has made the top list, and I think we're equally as excited about the work to help support the building of those kind of foundational building blocks, be it with the ecotourism master plan or things like the green finance delegation that we managed to do a couple of years ago, together with bringing Aceh decision makers to the Great Bear to meet and have a learning exchange with, ideas and insights of work that's been done in the Leuser, along with some of the work and insights and leadership that's been taken within the Great Bear Rainforest. That was also kind of a fun initiative with that. But also congratulations on I think that leadership capacity and organizational development work, that's so very important, right? Like Haka is a really important organization within the Leuser ecosystem landscape. And you're doing big things now and will continue to do big things into the future. And so to mark your 10th anniversary by actually being able to make that investment in the longevity and the health and the impact of the org, I think is super, super exciting. So
Yeah,
surprise, surprise, the flip side of that is, are there any particularly gnarly challenges that you're kind of trying to navigate around or you see popping up?
One of the gnarly challenges that we haven't got to solve is the paradigm shift that needs to happen in landscape like the Leuser ecosystem, that needs to happen in Aceh, that needs to happen in Indonesia and globally. That paradigm shift, that the work of conservation is not the work of others, but the work of all of us. The fact that all of us enjoy the ecosystem services that nature gives. We all drink water, we all eat food, this earth produces, we all breathe air. But as if the responsibility to take care of nature and environment is the responsibility of others. That's like one of the gnarly challenges that, I think a lot of us have better understanding on the climate challenges. Very few of us have that same level of understanding about biodiversity collapse. Somehow the perspective that we have on our relationship with nature then influence so many aspects of our life and our decision making. I imagine an alternative world where we have better relationship with nature. We no longer see landscape like the Leuser ecosystem simply as resources, the timber to be logged, land to be planted, or soil to be mined. And changes in that perspective would allow us to reimagine a future that's different than what we are in trajectory into at the moment.
It's so true, right? Like it changes our own relationship with nature, and then how we as a society interact with it, like what we provide a social license for, the kinds of things that we will allow. The fact that we currently allow landscapes like the Leuser to be kind of mowed down for palm oil production, like that would, like, to actually reach a place where, it is as abhorrent as the idea of slavery or child labor or the ivory trade.
Yeah.
And so when you think about social license or that kind of broader paradigm shift work, that work is probably translating through in your work at a very local level, and then also at a global level. And I'm wondering how you balance those two.
I've always loved my work at the local level more, but then the work at the global level as something that is necessary. I'm a giant introvert, so I kind of always struggle a little bit if I need to go on stage and talk about this or go public and talk about this like today.
Right.
But, knowing and understanding that sometimes you just need a glimpse of opportunity to fall in love with the landscape, to want to protect it. You will not love something that you don't know, and you would not want to protect something that you don't love. And taking that as this is what's necessary, this is what needs to be done, so be it. Right.
Yeah, we don't generally change our behaviors because of what we know, right? We change them because of what we feel connection to and love. So I'm glad that you muster and rally and that you share yourself on the global as well. There was something that we read within the team that we just loved from you, and it was a quote, I think in an article where you'd said that we need more women in positions of leadership, and especially women from the grassroots. And you were noting kind of that, you know, women make up half of the world's population, and yet only a fraction generally sit at decision-making table. Women in communities are the guardians, and I'm quoting here, guardians of environmental wisdom, yet they are often an untapped source of knowledge, underappreciated, and therefore under-resourced. Just like, can you share a little bit about what you see on the ground with women in the movement to protect the Leuser ecosystem, maybe starting with the very local, and then we can move more to the global.
A few years ago, I met this lady. Her name is Sumini. When I first met her, she was already the leader of village forest management team. She was already protecting forests. So I asked her, why did she participate in the forest protection, knowing that that's not a common choice for women in the village in Aceh, a very patriarchal, very conservative society. And she tells me the story that back in 2013, again, a huge flash flood come in and swept their village, destroying bridges, destroying homes, even destroying their local clinic. At that time, she have to take refuge in a local school. The school was not posh, as you could imagine. She lived in a tent within the school, and she struggled to have access to water and sanitation. And she found it really, she struggled through having to go to the bathroom at night, especially during that time of the month. And this is the kind of struggle that the man often doesn't understand. Before that happened, she have sensed that potentially floods might happen as people go log in the forest. Before that happened, she used to go up the mountain with her husband, and anytime they come across illegal logging or people engaging in encroachment, she's been trying to warn them not to do that. But again, also because she's a woman and she's a nobody, they challenge her back. They ask her, why are you stopping us from doing what we do? Who are you? What are your authorities? That places her in the positions like, right, I don't have the authority. I'm practically a nobody. So when we come across this encounter, she was telling us, we want the people in this village wants to protect the forest up the mountain. But because we don't have the authority to do so, we don't know what to do. We work with them to then establish a village forest initiatives in that area. We work with them to map out the areas, even though they don't know how to read map or read GPS in the first place, but they know where the top of the mountain is, they know where the waterfall is, they know what happened in which areas, because it's such an intimate knowledge for them. Once we establish, this is a village forest, this is the area that you can protect, we launched together with them the first ever woman-led ranger team. And this is something unusual because you don't, in places like Indonesia, you don't quite imagine a woman put on a uniform and walking out the forest to patrol. But what we also learn is they are a lot more effective than any male ranger that we have. For that reason, it's largely down to the fact that they de-escalate. Anytime there's conflict, they de-escalate first. So when we come across people engaging in illegal logging, instead of instantly getting angry and trying to kick them out and use arms or anything or use violence, they would first invite them for a coffee, which is famous in Aceh. Have coffee, have
very
lunch,
good coffee.
Very good coffee, have meals, and then talk things through, as women tend to do. Ask them where they're from, who is their parents, using the close-knit relationship and social structure that exists in the village to convince people engaging in illegal logging to stop. it will get to a point where these encroachers and illegal loggers felt so ashamed that an elderly lady, almost like their mother, is telling them off. So they were like, oh my God, since they started the village forest, deforestation in that area have driven down to zero. And they managed to engage these illegal loggers to replant areas where they log because they feel so ashamed to have engaged in these activities. If only women like Sumini could participate in the global conversation that drive policies around landscape protection, biodiversity crisis, and climate, those conversations would be a lot more humane and grounded to the communities.
Yeah, I love that story. I love the work that you've been doing in that community, and there's something so powerful about that. And I feel very honored that on the last visit that we were there in Aceh, that we actually got to visit that community, and it was really quite astounding, because I've been in a lot of community kind of meetings where, you know, it's not that women aren't represented, but there are, you know, there's a kind of, the balance sits more with the men of the community, and definitely the balance of the conversation sits there. And there were two men at one point, the head of the village and the imam, and everybody else were dynamo women who are all kind of actively engaged in reforestation, in patrols, in building kind of the local alternative economies. It was really very inspiring and very powerful. And so that's a really important part of Haka's work as well, is women empowerment and looking to take the work from that community, you know, as resourcing and capacity allows, to be able to potentially replicate that elsewhere across Aceh.
Yeah, I mean, when I started working in Leuser, there's very few women around me. And now to realize, actually, you know, because there's more women working in this landscape, somehow we collaborate better. Somehow we listen better. And somehow, you know, that interaction with the men also, and all these different organizations have a lot less egotistical fight.
Right. I think we'll move over to kind of more public Q&A, but I'm just wondering, before we do, can you share a little bit of your experience? Like, you're a woman that's both working on the front lines in Indonesia as well as on the global stage. How is that experience for you, this kind of advocacy work? Like, obviously, you know, environmental defenders around the world are threatened. I think Global Witness has done excellent work for many years now, documenting the threats as well as the loss of life that ultimately, you know, many of our colleagues globally are paying the ultimate price for defending traditional lands or working towards environmental change. But also, you know, being a high-profile woman on a global stage, as well as within a landscape, can be challenging. And so, just how is that experience for you? How do you handle and navigate?
It has been a mixed bag.
Sure.
I think, I mean, you know, I have been privileged to grow up in the family where a woman's achievement is expected to be at the same level as men. My parents have 4 girls that they raise and 1 boy, and you know, my brother have always felt the pressure of living with all these big sisters who are driving
Strong
him,
women, yes.
strong women who's driving him nuts. But at the same time, having that being raised in that family, I sort of take it for granted that women are appreciated at home. We are expected to share the domestic duties equally, and taking the responsibilities together. So when I first engaged in the professional world, where these expectations are not equally distributed at level, it comes at first a little bit as a surprise to me. When people throw off the initial sexist jokes and comments, I'm like, huh? Why? What happened? It didn't connect in my head that they did that because I'm a woman and they would not do that to a man. When I got on the cover of Time magazine, so many people got very angry that I was representing this region, this province in Aceh, this landscape, the Leuser ecosystem that's mostly in Aceh, without wearing headscarf. So the choices of clothing and covering become more of a bigger deal than the message that I'm trying to deliver. And from time to time, it also become a challenge for the team to navigate the reality that the leadership is led by a woman who defy convention. And it challenged their own perspective as well on how they deal with me as how they deal with other female in their life. I realize that when it comes to threat of life, for a lot of people working in environmental protection and defending land, I have been lucky in many ways that I have not had the same level of threat that many others have faced. It really saddens me every time I hear news stories of fellow activists that are facing this threat and pay for the work that they do with their life, the family that lost them in the process. And I'm keenly aware how my privilege might have protected me from this threat, but it may have not extended enough to the community that I serve or the team that work in Hakka. A number of cases that we pursue was forced to be dropped because the level of threat to the team escalated to a point that they are fearful for their life. We engage the team in security training because we come to better understand the risks that come with doing this work. We're trying to do the best that we can. We could say that we are lucky that we still have the team somewhat intact, but at the same time, it also makes me quite angry that the battle to protect the environment versus, fighting destruction and exploitation needs to cost us our life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that you've said that very eloquently, and I think we're all, those of us that work within global organizations, are aware of the privilege that there is, the gift that we have to work on issues that we're passionate about, that are so important, but also that the risk that our frontline partners face is often, like so kind of like, it's just in a completely different realm. And so yeah, we're always very grateful and try and be mindful for how we can help protect rather than add and exacerbate. But changing the paradigm and changing the structures that are business as usual is not without resistance, as we all know. So I could, keep popping you questions. And one of those, that last question did relate to one of the questions from the audience. But let's just nab a couple more questions from our folks that are listening in. One is around which forces or entities, be it government or companies, do you see as the biggest obstacles to achieving change in how forests and its inhabitants, both two-legged and two-winged and four-legged, are viewed and kept safe?
I personally did not see these entities as separate. We all entangled in our relationship between politics and economies, and who we elect as government and what kind of shape they would take, as well as who we voted with our dollars, with our money, who we enrich and with our choices. Then they kind of, like strengthen each other or weaken each other. Of course, the only space that I truly understand is the space where I work, the province of Aceh, the government of Indonesia. And the fact that, in Indonesia, elections are very expensive. You need to spend,
big.
yeah, huge. You need to
Right.
spend so much money to get elected. Even if you don't pay your constituents, all those visits to the village, all those infrastructure that people expect you to provide, from football field to musical instruments for the village music teams, those things need to come out of pocket. So politicians tend to see it as an initial investment that they put in. Once they get elected, they somehow gonna get it back. How do they get it back? Part of it is through direct corruption, taking on government, using government budgets for their own personal gains. Sometimes it's by selling permits. Why do I say selling? For government to issue, say, 1,000 hectares concessions, they could foresee that the company would make X amount of money by doing that, and they get kickbacks. The biggest corruption cases in Indonesia, corruption cases related to permits, to land distribution, to plantations, to mining. And this happened on the fringes of the country, away from the central government, away from Jakarta. So how much bigger of a threat is companies or governments? I guess it's both. It's they're working on it together. But at the same time, in the past, we have proven that this patronage link could be weakened when there is too much pressure on one or the other. So when we when the international community run this campaign and put so much spotlight on this palm oil company, the PT Kalista Alam, every government institutions and individuals that was initially protecting this company begin to let go, begin to let the company fall. It's like, you know what, I don't want to have to do anything with you. This is too much of a mess. It may stick on me, so I'm gonna let you fall. And really, this is how they lose their ally in the government, and therefore they lose the protection. Once they lose that shell protection from law enforcement institutions, from government, then they begin to feel the pressure of having the law enforced on them. And this is the kind of work that I guess organization like Canopy is really good at, because you put a market pressure on companies that would then enable us on the local level to put pressure on law enforcement and getting the two together, forcing the companies to act. So yeah, both government and companies, they could be good, they could be horrible, but it also provide that relationship, provide us with this opportunity to change the practice.
Right. And for us working in the international marketplace, working with Haka and other local organizations is really helpful as we work with our brand partners to help provide them with a line of sight as to what's happening on the ground in their supply chains. I'm going to try and squeak one. I know that the team are going to want me to sort of probably move to a wrap, but can you, like, in maybe 30 or 45 seconds, and sorry, this does not do this question justice, but any kind of top bullet points around what Haka's strategy is to encourage and facilitate women to actively participate in forest protection activities?
Oh, we're pulling together all these women that is engaging in forest protection. We have various convening where we bring all these women from the grassroots together and share stories and learning from one another, because we realize that sometimes the challenge is not necessarily about environmental protection. The challenge is how they navigate the complexity of their marriage, how they get their mother-in-law and how they get their husband's family to agree to allow them to do what they need to do instead of putting a double burden on them. So pulling the collective, enabling this woman to share the stories, to be together and find that sisterhood in one another, really strengthen them. And I find that as one of the pathways that make me much stronger. When I come together with groups of women that is working to protect the Leuser ecosystem, I feel stronger too.
That's great. Nothing like solidarity and connection, right? So now that we're all kind of feeling that sisterly connection, we have people from all around the world. We have some folks from Australia, from Canada, and the US, and Europe, and Southeast Asia. What can we do to support efforts to protect the Leuser?
Get to know the places, get to know the landscape, get to know the people. Allow yourself to fall in love with these initiatives, and that would enable you to do more.
All right. And I think maybe for me, one of the safeguarding the world's forests, it requires us to systemically alleviate the pressure off forests. And that requires us to shift these current drivers of deforestation and forest degradation to circular alternatives. And so that's part of the core of Canopy's next gen solutions work with brands and producers and innovators. But building a whole new supply chain takes time. And whilst that transition happens, I'm really heartened to know that there are frontline defenders like you, Wiza, and others that are ensuring that magical landscapes like the Leuser and other of the world's forest, climate critical forests are standing for today, for tomorrow, and into the future. So unfortunately, we've run out of time. For those who want to support Wiza's work, feel free to be in contact. We're also happy to support that connection being made, because I know that Wiza is incredibly busy. So rather than you just having to deal with a flood of people, for those who want to support Canopy's work in the Leuser or some of our other landscapes of hope around the world, obviously don't hesitate to be in contact with us, with Katie or Britt in particular. For anyone who asked a question, we didn't quite get around to it, we will try and loop back within the next week or so with anything. I'll just wrap by saying huge thanks to you, Wiza, and to the entire team at Haka for doing such inspiring work day after day. As I said at the start, not only are you an amazing frontline defender, you're one of my favorite people in the movement. So I'm so excited that you gave us this hour of your time. And then obviously a huge thanks to everybody else for joining us. Here's to 2023 being an absolutely spectacular spin around the sun for each of you, for the Leuser, as well as for our planet. So thanks everybody, and depending on where you are in the world, good night or good morning. Selamat pagi.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you so much.